If you're looking for stories, strategies, and actionable advice on how entrepreneurial careers start, you're in the right place. I'm your host, Rui, and this is the Startup Journey podcast, the show where every week I sit down with different entrepreneurs, experts, and thought leaders to dig deep into what it takes to get a startup off the ground. Today I'm joined by Daniel Lenton, the founder and CEO of Unify. Daniel has a PhD in deep learning dense spatial perception for robotic manipulation from Imperial College London, consistently rated in the top 10 universities in the world, and is known for his passion for diving deep into engineering challenges. He went through Y Combinator's program, recently raised 8 million in funding for Unify, which is a cutting-edge startup building neural routers to send each prompt to the best large language model available. Daniel, thank you for joining me today. How are you?
Yes, very good. Thank you. Busy day, but yeah, really great to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Thank you for being here. So, I actually can't believe I got your PhD title right. It's quite a mouthful, I would say.
It is quite a
A-
mouthful.
Anyway, our purpose today, as you know, is to bring your insights and lessons to our community of entrepreneurs so that they can apply them in their own journeys.
Yeah,
So, without further ado, how did the idea for Unify come up?
good question. Well, actually, interestingly enough, we were doing something quite different originally. So we were building a project called Ivy, this unified machine learning framework in Python. And basically, the idea came from just having many customer conversations and realizing that the world of AI has obviously shifted. More and more people are building on top of these large language models instead of training things from scratch. And we realized a lot of people were just finding it very difficult to get started. There's a lot of different models, a lot of different providers. People weren't sure whether to be using GPT-4 or Anthropic or Gemini or Llama, etc. Weren't sure which provider to use, and really wanted to make sure they could not only get very good quality, but get things that were responsive enough and cheap enough. And it became clear, I suppose, I'm not sure exactly where the idea came from, but basically it became clear that there's a huge abundance of these different models and providers. And obviously, not every single prompt needs the very best model. Some prompts are appropriate for a smaller model, some are appropriate for a larger model. And actually, sending these to the most appropriate model on a case by case basis seemed to be something that could solve the problems that a lot of the customers were talking to us to. So it was mainly driven by, identifying a problem and then trying to think about ways to elegantly solve it, basically.
Okay, so already I see a bunch of things there that are quite interesting, like listening to those customers, seeing where the market is heading, and actually with your background and profile as well, it's no wonder that you were able to raise 8 million. I'm not taking any merit out because I know that especially today it's quite hard to do so, but I see a lot of interesting things that we can tap into in this conversation. So, what were you doing before, and when did you decide to take the leap? Because you mentioned this was a different project, but that was not all you were doing, right? When did you decide that, okay, I'm going to go all in? This is what I want to do?
Yeah. So with regards to the company pivot, I mean, I guess there was two answers to that question. First of all, in terms of whether to dive into the company in the first place, which was 2 years ago, that was basically I was working on this open source project, and I guess partly I just was very passionate about that, and I knew that I guess I mean, I've been doing robotics research and I've been doing these various projects, but I just fell in love with the infrastructure and I just knew that there was a lot of problems just for getting started quickly and easily. And I just really wanted to dive in and help to address a lot of the infrastructure challenges and a lot of the fragmentation. So I just knew that it was a problem I was very passionate about, and I kind of have always been motivated by working on something that I think is important and that I'm excited to work on, and that's way more important to me than the funding we've raised or anything like this. Like as long as you're happy every day and excited, that's kind of really the objective one to optimize for. So that was just quite clear quite quickly. In terms of the pivot, so when we kind of changed the company's direction towards the beginning of this year, I think I mean it's quite a long answer, but basically it became clear that the market that we were trying to address was not growing. And in fact, if anything, it was getting smaller, and that the AI landscape had evolved. I won't get too technical with it, but basically, when it became clear that the customers weren't having the problem we thought they were, or indeed that they were having a year and a half before, and that problem seemed to change and dissolve a bit. And a really important thing whenever you're doing founding a company is obviously to stay way more laser focused on the problem and not the solution. So as soon as you start trying to shoehorn your solution, no matter how much time you've worked on it, then you're doing the wrong thing. You really need to be kind of obsessed with problems. And there was just a moment where we realized this isn't the right direction. We need to change direction. And it's definitely been, or at least so far, the signals are that it was the right decision. So definitely happy that we made the tough decision. Yeah.
This is something I've seen happening over and over again, and I've seen brilliant teams, brilliant projects go to waste because there's a certain commitment and actually resistance to change, right?
Yeah.
So I really want to dig a bit deeper into this. So when you say that the market was not evolving, that
Yeah.
the, let's say, the need for the solution wasn't really there, right? Not as much,
Yeah.
maybe not a bleeding neck, let's say, maybe just a pain.
Yeah.
What was the data that you used to make this decision? So was it quantitative, qualitative, speaking with people? Was it the actual metrics from the response to the platform itself? So
Yeah.
what did you use to say, okay, let's
Yeah.
trash it, let's pivot, let's go the other direction?
I guess there's a few things. One of which is that we'd been speaking to a lot of enterprises that were originally interested. I mean, basically, they were using TensorFlow and they wanted to use our solution to bridge the gap between TensorFlow and PyTorch. And a lot of those enterprises that had previously been very committed to using TensorFlow and want to use our solution to bridge the gap had then decided to migrate over to PyTorch. So like we'd just through customer conversations learned that through ongoing relationships. Another one Another thing was just observing the fact that PyTorch became a lot stronger. So PyTorch used to be very runtime inefficient in deployment, but then things like Torch FX, which made function tracing much better, and Executorch and Torch 2 with Torch Compile. Again, quite technical stuff here, but basically PyTorch became much more runtime efficient. And that meant that the benefits of converting PyTorch to other efficient languages like or frameworks like TensorFlow and JAX brought less benefits. It used to be the case that converting PyTorch to JAX would make it, 5 or 6 times faster. That then reduced to 2 times faster, then maybe 1.5 times faster. So I guess like evolving like changes in the landscape that were there for everyone to see, as well as customer conversations, kind of helped make that decision. Now that's not to say that there's not a market and that what we built wouldn't have a decent number of users, but I guess like I've always been very keen to solve the biggest problems and have the biggest impact we can. And given that we had a ton of people we were speaking to that had a very different problem that I thought we could solve, and we were solving another problem that a smaller group of enterprises had, it just felt like the right time to double down and solve this much broader problem that we knew we could solve.
Okay, so on this topic of the landscape evolving, this is something I'm seeing a lot as well because there are
Yeah.
a lot of people building things on top of LLMs actually,
Mhm.
and then ChatGPT brings a new release that actually makes that obsolete. A lot of business models being challenged every day, and
Yeah.
we're seeing some interesting disruption. Cool. So when you were when was clear that you needed to do this pivot, was it your initiative? Was it a combination? The team that you had with you back in the day was aligned with you? Did you have to convince them? So, what was the dynamic there to implement after realizing that this was something that needed to change?
Yeah, I think it was somewhat collective. I think it didn't require too much convincing. To be honest, it mainly came from me. We've been quite lucky that our investors, for example, have been quite hands off and hands on when requested. So we certainly don't have people trying to steer us, stepping in to try to correct course or everything like that. People have trusted me to set the direction and set the vision and everything. And so basically it was just from myself and there was no external pressure to change direction at all, really. But with the team, I think all of us got a sense that what we were building wasn't quite in the right direction and that it wasn't quite getting the traction that we thought. And obviously all of us being very deeply technical and understanding the space knew that a few things that had happened in the space meant that our solution was less valuable. So I think all of us were aware of this. Now, what made it quite difficult is that we actually reduced the team. So not because of lack of runway, but more just because when we changed direction, what we really needed was a much smaller, more nimble team that can iterate on ideas quickly, execute very quickly without the through nobody's particular fault. Just having a slightly bigger team means there is a bit more inertia. Like there's more communication bottleneck. It's my job to make sure everybody has something to do. And if there's not 20 independent tasks to be done, you end up kind of making up work where it's not really needed and stuff. So it became clear that the team size was a bit too big for kind of where we were post pivot. and therefore it just ended up making us much more productive actually to reduce the team size. But that was very difficult, obviously. I mean, everyone's been incredibly gracious and understanding, and I remain in good contact with everybody that was on the team, but definitely kind of letting decent 15 people or so on the team go, maybe slightly more than that, was not an easy thing to do. Obviously it's one of the least fun jobs as a founder, but you got to make difficult decisions sometimes, and definitely for the company, and indeed for everybody that left, it's been the right decision, because you don't want to be part of a company where you're not needed and not useful. So everyone's now gone on to do great other things and stuff. But yeah, definitely not the easiest thing. So being a founder seems very glossy, but there's difficult parts as well.
Not at all. Most of the successful founders I know tell me that if they had known this from the start, they would never do it.
Yeah,
Most
yeah.
of Because it's mental, right? It's a
It
crazy
is.
ride, and
It is.
I'm right there with you. I mean, that is for me the worst part of the job, having to
Yeah, yeah.
let someone go. And mind you, that I actually think there are great reasons to do it, not only for the sake of the company, because if
Yeah.
it's not successful, everyone actually loses their job, right? So it's
Exactly. Yeah.
better to change in the right direction than privileging the whole and not
Yeah.
just one individual, which is one of the hardest things that you need to do
Yeah, yeah.
sometimes. And then for those people themselves, because
For
I mean,
sure.
for them, it's going to be better for them to look for something else instead of just trying to fit a round
No,
shape
exactly.
into a
It,
square.
it
So
it benefits nobody to like be doing work that's not strictly needed for the company. Everybody kind of loses there, I think, for sure.
yeah, yeah. And the moment that you start making those decisions, you are closer to making better decisions and more of those decisions
Yeah.
instead of the ones that take you to the graveyard of the startup world.
Yeah.
So perfect, Daniel. You have a really cool background, right? You studied engineering and you had some robotics experience there. You were at Amazon at some point in an internship, right, as a
Yep.
research scientist. Then you did some research on robotics as well.
Mhm.
At a certain point, you decided, okay, that academic background, that researcher background, I really want to build something, right?
Yeah.
So, what was, if any, your biggest fear?
Well, I guess it was quite a gradual transition, to be honest. So I was quite fortunate that there was never this like big like, now I'm going to drop all the opportunities and try this thing that's scary to do on my own. Like basically I'd started working on the open source repository. Again, this was with Ivy, so the original idea of the company. I'd started working on that in parallel with my research, and it was kind of a side hobbyist project. We open sourced that, got a paper out as well, and that got a decent amount of traction. And actually, then investors just started to reach out on LinkedIn. Actually, so we're still in this, I think, quite fortunate position where we have still never reached out to any investors. Every investor has been inbound that's come through, or kind of mutual intros. So we never had this like need to kind of chase after trying to raise money or something. And we raised the first kind of 200K off the back of the open source project, and kind of even as I was still doing the research and in the PhD and everything. So it was all quite a seamless transition actually. Yeah. So there was it was never really that scary. I guess like it continues. You need to be a bit scared in general though, day to day, about making sure your company's on the right path. So I don't think it's any more scary at the beginning than it is now in terms of just like the responsibility I feel to the team, more to the team than myself. And also, I don't know if this is a good thing to say, but I probably feel more responsible to the team than the investors, even because like the team and myself, obviously, kind of putting in our early 20s, our kind of prime time, starting off our careers, and we all want to build something that's really valuable and really solves a problem. And I feel a big responsibility to them to make sure that all of their hard work is indeed building something that's going to amount to really being an important part of the AI stack, and making sure that we're on the path to do that is the thing that probably motivates me more than my own risk of failure as a founder, or feeling any sense of, obviously I do feel I'm very grateful, incredibly grateful to our investors, and want to make sure we do a great job for them. But I think I'm kind of more motivated by making sure that our team like is building something in their prime time of their engineering careers as well, to be honest. But yeah, so you always need to have a bit of fear, but you also can't let the fear drive you
Otherwise,
too much,
yeah.
because what you need to be doing every day is starting the day with like excited enthusiasm to solve the problem and energy to build quickly, and not like paralysis from fear of failure or something. So you need to keep it within balance. Obviously you need to use the nervous energy to kind of get excited and motivated.
100%. From what I'm hearing here and what you said already, I think your investors would love to hear that, what you just said about the team, right? Because it
Hope
seems
so.
to me that you have smart money there, and that plays a huge role, right? Having someone that can offer some guidance, not
Yeah,
just the money, but also they don't try to enforce their own perceptions or biased
no, for
visions or
sure.
whatever, right? So actually, and I can relate a lot because the line in the sand. So I do everything I can for my clients. The line in the sand is if it hurts my ability to provide a safe and good
Yeah,
environment for the team, right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
those are the most important elements in this equation for me.
yeah,
So the environment in a startup is very different than the one you had when you were doing your internship at Amazon, right?
yeah.
What was that transition like? Was it a shock? How did that go?
Yeah, I don't know. Lots of ways I can answer that question. I guess so. Obviously, one thing I can say about my time at Amazon and also my time in the PhD is that I learnt a huge amount from my colleagues. So, as somebody that did a mechanical engineering degree originally, my software engineering skills were, I don't know, like, we're not the greatest. I'd done like very hacked projects where it would be like one massive Python file doing some computer vision stuff or whatever. Again, because my degree wasn't software engineering, so I'd really become a good hacker, but not a good software engineer. So yeah, so in both my lab and Amazon, I learned a ton from my colleagues. I think one thing that I've always, and maybe this is more of a me problem, but I've always like struggled a little bit with not having the full freedom to kind of do exactly what I want to do. I felt this a little bit in the PhD and a little bit in Amazon as well. And obviously it makes sense because like there's a broader vision of like what you're meant to be doing. Like you're kind of a piece of this broader system. And obviously
Spotting
like
the
there's
wheel.
you know, there's a lot of freedom, but there's still like reined into one particular area that you need to work on. And I definitely think I thrive when I'm able to set the vision myself. I kind of obviously get really sometimes, and it's probably just because I get very into particular ideas and I can't let them go. And I think sometimes that's like pushed up against like the broader strategy of the vision or whatever. So I personally love the freedom of being a founder and being able to kind of set the vision and everything. It's something that I feel incredibly grateful to be able to do. I think the other thing that is obviously the case though is that there's just way less structure, so you need to be very disciplined and like I just have quite a lot of conviction because there's no guardrails when you're a founder. Like it's just you and like a lot of people that are like that you're responsible for in a way, and like you're responsible for making sure this money doesn't all get wasted. You're responsible for making sure everyone that's on the team is like building for something and actually like setting themselves up and everything. And yeah, you're responsible for your customers as well. And in a way, like the buck always stops with me. So sometimes that it is a lot more pressure. The grass is always greener, right? I do sometimes romanticize about just being in like a safety cocoon of a big company where like I can just go home and have my dinner and watch the football and not think about like all the sales calls or whatever's like whatever fire there is to put out. But on balance, I definitely like the pressure and the responsibility and the freedom and everything as well. I really thrive with all of that, I think.
Yeah, the bad days are really bad. The good days are really good,
Exactly.
right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's one of those things that you're not there, cut in the middle.
Definitely.
So perfect. By the way, as a marketer, I take pride in having built a few inbound engines on my own, right?
Yeah.
So enabling companies to execute sales in a much easier way.
Yeah.
Inbound investors is actually super cool. So congratulations on that. I completely understand the circumstances that led to it. I've seen other cases, but it's also something I like to really highlight because doing things in a certain way
Mhm.
can lead to that interest, right? Because investors are looking for money that can actually multiply
Yeah.
their money, right? So if you
I'm
can
not sure what
also
it is that we did for that, to be honest, but I'm definitely very happy that that's how the cards have fallen.
Yeah, this is something that most likely would have to be in a second conversation because for sure working in an open source
Yeah.
project helped
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
there's visibility on that. But I would
Definitely.
also like to understand how was the communication. If you guys were
Yeah.
active on LinkedIn, if you were talking
Yeah.
about this, if there was any buzz that you were
Yeah.
creating, even if it was unintentional, right?
Yeah.
That led to this because it's again, going back to the marketing fundamentals
Yeah.
and looking at investors as a potential customer,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what do they need to see in order to feel that trust, that credibility, that
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
trustworthiness that will lead them to invest in the team?
Yeah.
But anyway, I need to go back to the conversation about Unify.
Yeah.
So you went through Y Combinator, right?
Yes.
And I would like to understand at what stage of the project this happened. So, did you have a product already? You were in the process of building it. Did it contribute to validate what you were trying to execute? Although the market, the trend of the market, I would say your idea, it's one of your project is one of those where after hearing it, right, I go like, yeah, that makes perfect sense, right? Because we have tools like Poe that have gather all the LLMs, but
Yeah.
having a brain that actually routes the prompt to the best possible solution is massive. It's super cool, and it makes perfect sense. So, on that angle, what was the role that Y Combinator played, and
Yeah.
how did you validate the idea? I think that's the question.
Yeah, sure. So Y Combinator was actually, so we were part of the Winter 23 batch, so kind of January till March 2023. So that was pre-pivot, let's say. We really doubled down on LLMs as of basically January this year. So it was basically a year before we did the final pivot. So YC actually weren't the very first investors. So when we did YC, we'd already raised kind of 1.5 million, I think. And actually, like, strangely enough, I didn't even participate in the batch that much because we had quite a large team at that point in time. I joined as much as I could, but I wasn't that present during the batch itself, which in retrospect was not necessarily the best decision because I mean, I think a little bit. I had this impression that all of like YC's advice like didn't fully apply to us because we were like deep tech. We were building this framework that unified all the other frameworks. It was like open source infrastructure. It's not really the typical kind of B2C SaaS flavor that YC really shine with. But I was wrong basically. A lot of the like a lot of the very basic things like don't overhire, like really validate product market fit, don't like build a solution in search of a problem. I mean, in fairness to us, like the evolving LLM, the evolving AI landscape was part of it. So like we did have we were solving a real problem, and like that problem kind of disappeared. But I still do think we weren't talking to us enough customers. Like I probably had spoken to like 40 or 50 customers in the whole first year, and like now I'm speaking to like 6 or 7 a day. And like, I mean, that's pretty extreme, but like we weren't taking that quite clearly enough, and like we weren't. What we do now, for example, is like every single feature we build is backtracked to a customer problem. Well, not necessarily a feature request, again, because sometimes customers don't know the feature they need, but they know their problems. But it's always backtracked to a customer problem. And that was not the case at all with Ivy. With Ivy, it was like we're building this infrastructure with this grand vision for the future, and we fell into the trap of becoming a little bit disconnected from like the actual day-to-day problems that the user base were having. So this is like YC 101. They even call it a CISP, a solution associated with a problem. Don't overhire. If you raise a lot of money, like you shouldn't obsess about the wrong metrics, like how much money have you raised? How many employees do you have? And we never felt we were successful because we had a lot of employees, but I think we had a bit of a false sense of like we're doing well because we'd raised a lot. We had a lot of GitHub stars, like, kind of 14,000 GitHub stars, a massive community, and lots of metrics that were doing very well. Yeah, and then I think kind of what I then did was like watched a lot of the YC videos, talked to the partners more. Not that they're the only ones to give this advice, but just I think being totally honest, as a first time founder, I did fall into a few apparently very common traps. It doesn't make it feel any better that they're very common, but I guess learning from doing is one way of learning, and it's certainly the way that I have learned. But yeah, so I would say that anyway. I'd say that YC was quite early, and to be honest, like I think some of their general principles helped us make the pivot, even if it wasn't during the batch itself or during lots of back and forth. Just ingesting the user guide and the videos has like definitely refined my own like intuition on these things and really helped with some of this decision making we've been doing recently. So yeah, only good things to say about YC.
Cool. Two things there that on what you just said on the customer feedback,
Mhm.
right? So I had the privilege of working with or advising or mentoring literally hundreds of founders on their go-to-market.
Yeah.
And this is the number one thing. Speak to customers daily.
Yeah.
Actually engage with everyone, potential
Yeah.
investors, every stakeholder from
Yeah.
the get-go while you're building it, because
Yeah.
there's there are things that you learn there that
Sure.
are going to be paramount for success.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you'll land with something in the market, and then your
Yeah.
runway is not there for the pivots that you need to make. So
Yeah. Yeah.
start working on that early.
Yeah.
And this is the single most given advice, which is
Yeah.
customer feedback, speak
Yeah.
with potential customers,
Yeah.
get to know them as well as you know your mother. That
Yeah. Yeah.
is usually the expression I use,
Yeah.
because, and to your point, is not that you need to execute everything they say, because
Yeah.
you also risk a lot if you do everything that people tell you. And
Yeah.
going back to the whole saying, people would have faster
Yeah.
horses,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly.
Not
Yeah.
cars, if
Yeah. Yeah.
we were to do everything they say.
Yeah.
But getting truly understanding their behaviors, their motivations, the pain, and what
Yeah.
they're actually trying to solve, not the solution for the problem itself, but
Yeah.
what they are trying to achieve, right?
Yeah.
All of that plays a huge role, not only on the product execution, but on the positioning, on the
Yeah.
segmenting, the way that you target your addressable market, and
Sure.
all of that. So thank you for pointing that out. Then also on the vanity metrics, 100%, right?
Yeah.
Focusing on the wrong KPIs is so common, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
obviously there's a direct translation here to marketing. I don't care about website visits and
Yeah. Yeah.
social media followers, right?
Yeah.
The whole point is to
Yeah.
generate revenue, as
Yeah.
Chris Lockhead, the category pirate, usually says. If marketing does not translate into sales, it's just
Yeah.
arts and crafts,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
focusing on the right KPIs,
Yeah.
but actually measuring the things that you are
Yeah.
doing
Yeah.
plays a huge role there
For
as
sure.
well. Okay, Daniel. So the first customers, so the first users,
Yeah.
how did you acquire them?
So it was definitely a bit of a mix. It's interesting. I mean, without kind of going into kind of all the granular details. Like one of the first customers was actually through an investor dinner. So again, talking about like all the stakeholders, it was like an 8 roads dinner in London, and like I gave an intro saying, "Hey, I'm Dan. We're doing this. We're doing a router." And one of the other founders at the dinner. In fact, that led to two of our first customers that dinner. So in-person events can help as well, definitely when you're building these relationships. Outbound, definitely we have a outbound funnel that I do through my own LinkedIn. So I message people on LinkedIn, and we use Sales Navigator to kind of find people that seem to fit the right profile. And I just send a message to hop on a call, and that's led to two or three of the first. And also, I think the other thing is that launching quickly and often is very important. We did a kind of slightly bigger launch at the end of May, and that definitely generated a lot of inbound. So before that launch, we hadn't had any inbound, and after that launch, we've probably had like 50 or 60 companies book a call through our website, and now I don't know, kind of half a dozen of them are now using us. So that was kind of inbound just through the launch. And now we had someone that started using us last week that saw a post about us on Instagram or something. I have no idea. So I don't know, like obviously like I guess what you want to do is but long story short, it's a mix. And obviously then the other thing I would say is that like the approach we've really taken on board as well is like your first 10 customers that love what you do, you should really know who they are, and you should really like have a very white glove approach and iterate with them directly. So I think of our 10 first users, I've had probably 6 or 7 calls with all of them. I'm constantly in email back and forth and like really making sure that we are hands on integrating it for them and making it really work. Again, it's like the YC 101, like do things that don't scale kind of stuff. But
Yeah.
it's it's
Yes.
it's true. And again, I think I knew that a little bit, but it really is the case because again, the benefit is you need to like have a really strong mental model of your customer and your ICP. You need to really understand their motivations. And there's no other way of doing that really as well, apart from just actually being there with them, on the ground, getting it set up and really understanding why they're using it, what they're using it for. And also because it's also one of the superpowers you have as a startup. The fact that you can give this like incredibly personalized service is something that big enterprises can't do. So it's another like thing you should really leverage for the first customers for sure. And that's the other, sorry, just a long monologue, but the other thing I think is that as you're saying about this kind of vanity metrics and KPIs, like it's relatively easy if you do some hacks to kind of growth hack followers or growth hack whatever, but like what you really want is like to actually have solved a real problem. This is the really hard thing. Like it's kind of there are ways to do all this other stuff, but the really, really hard thing that almost nobody achieves is to build something that's actually useful to a large market. Like this is something that most startups never do before they die. And like in a way, like even if you're way behind the scenes with nobody paying attention and you're talking to all of these customers and no one gives a crap about you and you're not making any buzz or anything, like if you actually manage to learn that and actually get the product that matters and then they start telling their friends and you get word of mouth spreading, then you can kind of emerge from the ashes of not being known. And that's what everyone's trying to do in the end anyway. Like, unless you build a product that's actually useful that will organically grow, you're not doing the right thing. And sometimes the really hard work getting that in the state it needs to be is like happening without mass awareness, and that's fine. Like, you just got to believe in the process of actually building a useful thing with your early customers, and if you do that right, things will grow and you will address the market basically.
100%. And again, I've seen a lot of people hide behind solutions or actually products or brands that don't yet exist, right?
Yeah,
They launch and it's immediately the
yeah,
website executing the sale, and they want to actually hide all the weaknesses.
yeah.
And it really doesn't work, because
No.
then the arguments, the trust builders, the use cases, the testimonials, nothing is there,
Yeah.
right, to back that story. Usually it's more about, I usually say also that the first 1 to 10, as
Yeah,
to your point, is a very different strategy than 10 to 100,
for sure.
100 to 1000, right?
Yeah, yeah,
After you start getting those things.
yeah,
And I deeply believe that at the start, it needs to be founder led.
yeah,
It
yeah,
needs to be you. It needs, because no one else
yeah, yeah,
knows as much about it as you. No
yeah,
one else has the passion to go through,
yeah,
I don't know how many no's before getting a
yeah.
yes, and then really
A lot.
nurturing that yes, as if it's something really, really precious, because it
Yeah,
is,
yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah,
So, and then taking in the key elements
yeah,
to really fine tune the positioning, the
yeah,
messaging, and all of that.
yeah,
Because in the end of the day, this is something I deeply believe. You cannot outsource that part of
for sure.
the work.
No, no,
You
definitely
can
not.
the execution. You can find someone to help you do things right,
Yeah,
but to do the right things, it has to be
yeah,
the founder. And again, I see a lot of people making that mistake in
yeah,
going for marketing agencies
yeah,
or
yeah,
marketing hires very early on,
yeah,
when in my belief it should always be the founder
for sure.
going there speaking to customers. You
Yeah,
were going to
yeah.
say something on this, I think.
Well, I was just going to basically agree and say that at the beginning, it's incredibly entrepreneurial anyway, because what you're doing at the beginning is not really sales calls, it's kind of user discovery anyway, right? Like, you're trying to work out what to build. Like, and we're still doing that. Like, it's kind of also for us, it's been like a slow transition. It's like every call still in my mind starts out as 100% user discovery. Like, I have no idea if our problem is useful for these customers, and you need to be pretty technically minded and understand all the notes of our product to really know also if it is relevant for them or not. And like, and you need to be you need to be absorbing as much of this information to like set the entire roadmap of the company early on. So I just think yeah, as you say, it needs to be founder driven, and only once you have product market fit and you have a playbook, and every playbook is different. Like, it massively depends on your ICP and your go to market and everything. So until you have a playbook that has worked for 10 people or so and can scale, you can't even tell the person you hire what the hell they're supposed to be doing. So like, yeah, I totally agree with all of that.
100%. And I'll throw another thing in there. I mean, as a CMO, I actually execute sales calls.
Hmm.
So actually, some of the clients we have,
Yeah,
I was the one going there and speaking with them.
yeah,
Partially because in my current team, we don't have SDRs or
sure.
BDRs or any of those things, but
Yeah,
we are fully inbound. But I go there on one hand because I have that holistic view. I can think about the solution at a high level,
yeah,
but more than that, I need to know these people again, like I know my mother, so I can build
yeah,
better bridges between what we can do and what they need.
yeah,
So that's something I'll throw in as well. So
yeah,
for marketing hires early on, make sure that they can sell, right?
yeah,
Otherwise, marketing will focus on the wrong things.
yeah,
So also, I want to ask you something. What was your approach, to your point, what you were just saying? You mentioned earlier that you were doing some outbound as well,
yeah,
right? And you were reaching out to people on LinkedIn.
yeah.
What was the approach? Were you trying to sell the solution or inviting people to this problem that you were trying to solve? Take me through the actual execution.
Yeah, so basically, we first of all get like a list of relevant leads through various ways. Like, one of them is like looking at the people that have liked like Llama Index or LangChain posts, people that have like LLM in their job title, et cetera, et cetera. There's various different like ICP filtering approaches we've tried, and we kind of benchmark them against each other to see which pool of people are the most promising in terms of lead gen. But then, and honestly, this is genuinely how I see the first call. Like, I send a personal message that's relevant to what they're doing. I look at what the person is doing, send them a message that's very much tailored to them, and basically just say I would love to hop on a call and like chat about the LLM space. Basically, like, I think what you're doing is really cool. If I think it's cool, I will say that. And then we hop on a call, and it's literally just a 15-minute chat with no real agenda. And to be honest, that's how I see it, because I'm not sure exactly if they are going to have a problem that's related to what we're building at all. So in some cases, the what the call ends up achieving is it gives me another data point for what problems people actually have or what kind of ICP we should focus on. Maybe somebody's like just not at the stage yet where they're building LLM infrastructure and they're just still trying to just like understand how to even apply LLMs. Then I might say, okay, well, this kind of company, maybe actually they typically don't really have this problem. Maybe they have a totally different problem that's an adjacent space we could like look to build into in future. So it's all just kind of like trying to just build as much of a mental model about the problems people really have and how that relates to ICPs. And then we iterate on the ICP so we can filter more appropriately. We have a better understanding of the problem space and so on. And yeah, and obviously increasingly over time, more and more people, as we like refine the ICP, do have a problem that resonates with what we're doing. But even then, like the first call is literally a 50-minute touch base, then hop on a second call a couple of weeks or a week later. And that we almost always do that. And then on the second call, it's still not a demo or anything. It's really just like understanding their problem a bit more. Now we've kind of, made contact and we're kind of acquainted and everything. And then we start to maybe dive a bit deeper into their problem space. And then maybe on the third call, like actually demo everything and see if we can deploy it. It depends though. Sometimes on the first call, people are like, I've looked at your website. I love what you're doing. I'd like to get integrated today. And of course, we're then like, sure, let's go. But we don't push it too much. Yeah. And it's also not in our interest to do so because I think people know when they're being like sold to. So it's kind of you get an instant rejection like
Yes.
anyway. And B, it's not in our interest as well. Like I really the more time they spend speaking, the better, basically. Because that's the data that, I know what my sales pitch sounds like. If I just give that all day, every day, like I'm not learning anything. So yeah.
So I really want to stress this. So this is a brilliant team. The execution, from the standpoint of, let's say, your typical startup project, is great because what you were able to achieve in 2 years is great, and you're still doing things that don't scale after two
Oh,
years.
for
So
sure.
this is very important because there's this lure that you launch after 3 months, you raise money. After 3 months, you should be growing, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Rule of 40, and there are certain things that you start talking about.
Yeah, yeah.
It's often not the case. There's a lot of ups
No,
and downs going
definitely.
back and forth. And after, if in this really trendy, right, problem, in this,
Yeah.
at the let's say surfing the wave of AI with the right team,
Yeah.
with money raised in the current
Yeah.
landscape, you have all of this, and after 2 years, you're still doing things that don't scale. So
Yeah.
taking your time to actually ensure that you set the right foundations and that you
Yeah.
have the right elements to build a sustainable business is something that I cannot stress enough. So thank you
Yeah.
for that. Daniel, let's change gears here. So, are you currently fundraising?
Not currently, but we might be, early next year, but let's see.
Okay, so in the previous round, what were some of the most important lessons you learned on how to deal with investors?
Yeah, good question. So our round was quite unusual in so much as it was kind of an ongoing round. So we raised some in 2022, we then raised some in 2023, and then some more in this year as well. And actually, we haven't gone more than 2 months without raising since founding the company. So very, very unusual. I'm not saying that's the approach everybody should take, but we've basically just kind of kept relations with various investors open. I do find a lot of these conversations helpful, A, because it can foster introductions to relevant other companies in their portfolio or otherwise. Also, obviously, like there's nothing is as useful as talking to your prospective customers. This is by far the top of the list, but I have found talking to investors, particularly those that are like constantly talking to LLM infrastructure companies, to be quite useful because they do have insights or know of other relevant companies that we're chatting to and everything. So it is a form of staying plugged into the space as well to kind of touch base with particularly relevant investors every now and then. So to be honest, I've never really been in pitch mode. Like, I mean, I am obviously trying to sell the startup, but like in a way, I've treated every conversation with an investor as a genuine conversation where we have something to learn a bit as well. And yeah, and I think what's benefited us is obviously like at the beginning we had the open source traction and everything that was yeah, which definitely was a KPI that I think fostered a lot of investor interest. But I think the kind of honest approach resonates. I think also people kind of same with like sales modes. Like if you treat everything as like a presentation or performance, you don't build the relationships quite so well. So one thing I would say is like you're assessing the investors as much as they're assessing you. Like, don't feel too much like you need to like prove it to get their money that you don't deserve or whatever. Like, it's really a two-way thing, and it's just building a relationship. But yeah, I think the other thing we did is a rolling cap, which is again quite atypical. We also like said we don't really want a lead. That was by choice, and we have quite a large number of investors, none of whom have invested more than kind of 500K. Again, because we didn't want to raise any like large tickets from one fund. There's different strategies here. For us, I just have found it very beneficial to have a lot of great minds to liaise with and tap into it, and to brainstorm with different expertise and different experiences and so on. And this has really really helped us. Obviously, there's more signatures. I don't know. In the grand scheme of things, I don't think these party rounds are as bad as some investors might make you think they are. And yeah, everything for us has just been on like vanilla YC safes. So relatively clean so far. We've not done the price round yet. Anyway, you asked for like advice. I'm just telling you about around. Yeah, I don't know. I guess just kind of in a way, obviously, the product needs to speak for itself as well. So there's no kind of tricks here. There's no kind of obviously if you can like it's true that investors typically invest more likely through a fear of missing out than like just the thing. So obviously, if you can create some kind of competitive dynamics, and obviously the way to typically do that is to have a very set period that you define. This is when I'm raising. This is the deadline, and that creates time pressure and it creates competition, which can help. Not only the valuation that you're raising on, but just like the urgency with which investors act. Again, ironically, we haven't done that, and we've still managed to raise well, I think. But I think the rolling cap for us kind of did that a bit, because it was like, well, we're only going to raise one more ticket on this cap before we roll it up, and that kind of created a bit of like ongoing time pressure. I don't know. These are just some thoughts, but to be honest, if you build a good product, the investors will come. So in a way, like the final thing, I know I'm doing long answers. The other thing is like there are ways of like raising a lot of money, and like people are very good at raising even when they don't have a product to back it up. I guess that's something that I've seen some founders have, but that isn't always in your interest anyway. Like, to be honest, like a big reason of death for companies is raising too much too soon and feeling as though you need to spend it all before you have product market fit. So I also wouldn't stress too much about if you can raise 5 million or 10 million or 2 million. Like, if you get product market fit, you can do that with 2 million, and like the investors will come if you find that. So don't worry about it too much, is my kind of general feeling, I think.
Thank you. By the way, don't worry about long answers because I actually like to go deep into this topic.
Sure.
So be really at ease with it. So then we're going back to the same thing, right? Solving a real problem,
Yeah.
right? Having a good product, and then there's something there about your approach that I really like, which is the no BS
Yeah.
approach, right? So
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
authenticity of it. Go there,
Yeah.
be honest, be transparent, be
Yeah.
willing to learn as well, instead of putting up this facade that then will crumble at some point. It will
Yeah. Yeah.
crumble. So
For sure.
it's and it's exhausting to
Yeah.
keep
Yeah.
it. So go there, learn, be honest, ask what they need to see in order to
Yeah.
put
Yeah.
money there, because then if you execute, it makes it harder for them not to actually do it.
Yeah.
And you can read as many books as you want, Cialdini,
Yeah.
Kahneman,
Yeah.
all the persuasion that you can,
Yeah. Yeah.
creating scarcity, right? Those
Yeah. Yeah.
behavior and emotional triggers. In the end of the day, investors are looking for one thing, which
Yeah.
is to make money. So
Yeah. Yeah.
show them that they can make money with you,
Yeah.
and that's it.
Yeah.
So again, addressing their pain point, which is
Yeah.
how can I multiply this
Yeah.
now? That is a very different landscape than it was back in 2020 or
Yeah. For sure.
2019. Anyway, Daniel, 2 years ago, the first iteration of the platform,
Yeah.
who did you have with you? What was the team composition?
Just me, to be honest. So when it first started, I'm not by choice so much as just by the way the cards have fallen. I'm a sole founder, which I guess has its pros and cons. But yeah, so it was just me at the beginning, and we raised a 200K ticket. And what I actually first did was started to bring on interns, because we had this open source project, and we had basically actually thousands of totally independent tasks that could all be worked on. And we had a very clear vision of how Ivy needed to be built. Ironically, now not what we're working on at the moment, but it was an incredibly modular, parallelizable set of tasks to do. So bringing on interns made sense. And then we basically had, incredibly good people applying for the internships. Then, some of those then got promoted to full-time roles and so on. And actually now the entire team, so the 7 engineers on the team, everybody apart from myself started as an intern actually, but we now have an incredibly strong founding engineering team. So it's quite an unusual composition. We never did kind of like very kind of tactical top-down hiring, but we had 40,000 people apply to our role in total, because with this big open source thing, like we just had a ton of awareness, a ton of applications. We reached out to every computer science department in the world. We had this kind of big pipeline to kind of build awareness for the internship program. So we just had exceptional engineers, just recent graduates and stuff applying, and they now make up the core of the core team. So it's been a slightly unusual hiring approach, but for us, it's definitely worked well. Yeah.
So, what was a day in the life back then? So, 2 years ago, how many hours were you working? What was the focus split? How has that changed? Because some people spend 30% managing, 70% selling,
Yeah.
whatever, other people building the product. How was your day?
So back then, it was obviously only myself that had built the technical project. So I spent most of my time creating documentation and videos to explain how to contribute to the project and how to expand it. So I wanted everyone that was hired as an intern to just know exactly everything about the product, and it just needed a ton of documentation. So I spent a lot of time coding and a lot of time creating guides. And then over time, I spent more time kind of reviewing PRs, making strategic decisions on the technical kind of setup of the project and everything. Over time, that has evolved. And for the last year or so, I've done, which actually I want to change, but I've done no coding for the last year, basically. There's now kind of, very strong engineering team. I keep up to date with the code and check it out and everything, but I spend almost all of my effort now talking to customers. Obviously, I have a technical background, so I understand the project problem space and everything. But I spend all of my time talking to customers, like going through the sales calls, because we have Firefly. So going through the notes of the customers and trying to like really set the agenda and set what the top things we should focus on are, and then obviously doing managing, because I then set the task to focus on and everything. But having said all of this, I don't think that's perfect. I actually do think I've got a little bit too far from the code, not because I can improve the productivity, but just because I do fear over time, like there's a risk of me losing my technical sharpness, let's say, like, and it becomes a bit too abstracted and high level. And, there's like, I think Jeff Dean, like one of the head of AI at Google, still commits to the projects every week. And I think there's a lot of merit to that. And I'm actually noticing the team also noticing that, like, just like the kind of vision stuff and like the scientific theory and everything is like totally there. But when it comes to like the day-to-day implementation or practice of it, and like knowing what is a hard task to achieve and what's an easy task and stuff, like I do think it would benefit me to be a bit closer to the code. So, constantly trying to tweak how my weekly composition should look like, and still not got the perfect recipe yet. But yeah.
There's that split is only going to get worse. So
Yeah.
at some point you will face a tough decision,
Yeah.
but I mean, hopefully it's going to be for the right reasons.
Yeah. Yeah.
So now, how many hours were you working at the
Oh yeah.
start, and how many hours are you? So what's your week
Yeah. Yeah.
like?
So at the start, I was working 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. And it's now pretty much the same. I do work Sundays. So I take Sundays off for the last few weeks with the launch and everything. I've actually been working Sundays, and I think it's catching up with me. So I need to get back to having my Sundays off, I think. But yeah, so I work about whatever that is, kind of 70 to 80
72,
hours.
72. So 80
Yeah.
hour week,
Probably,
72.
yeah, probably 80. I mean, I say 12 hours, but our morning coffee sync is at 8 a.m. every day, and I'm normally working till later than 8 p.m. So it's probably more like 14 hours a day, to be honest.
And there's always an email, right? When
Yeah.
you are already in bed and you
Yeah,
are
yeah.
sending it if the phone is next to you. So,
Yeah, yeah.
okay,
I work
so
a
the
lot.
next the which is actually we need to be careful about it because there's a threshold there. It's interesting because until recently I always talked about work-life symbiosis instead of
Yeah,
work-life balance, right? If it
yeah,
energizes you, if it's what you
yeah.
want to be doing, you shouldn't refrain from doing it.
Sure.
Then I recently had from another interview for the podcast. I
Yeah,
had a slightly different perspective where someone was telling me about the risk of that becoming an addiction and the negative impact
yeah,
that may have as any addiction would. So
yeah.
for sure there are elements in there that you need to balance, but as long as you are happy, right, and you are
Yeah.
balanced, I think
What I do think,
fair
though,
game.
one thing I've learned is that structure is very important. So if I like, this is one of the reasons we have a morning, because we're fully remote. We have a morning coffee sync at 8 a.m. UK time every day, and as much as anything, that's to kind of force all of us to go to bed at a sensible time. Because I think what I've noticed is when I feel as though there is infinite time in the evening and like there's no real deadline, like short-term deadline, then it's a lot easier to procrastinate. Like if I feel as though I can work till 4 a.m. if I need to, I might go and play guitar for 20 minutes just to have a break. Or I might go watch a YouTube video and for 10 minutes, then it turns into an hour and I've just been sat there watching YouTube instead of actually taking a break and going for drinks with my friends or
Yeah.
whatever. So like, and that's something that's very easy to do. Obviously, everybody's aware of this. So I really think, like, I mean, now it's like, no, at 11 p.m. every day, doesn't matter. Even if there's like a big webinar tomorrow at 2 p.m. and I'm not prepared for it, doesn't matter. Like, if as soon as you start making exceptions to the rule, you're just going to end up in this place where there's no like set structure. So I really just say 11 p.m. is the deadline, and it then creates urgency. If it's 8 p.m. and you've got a lot to do, you're going to get those 3 hours done, and like you need to enforce that structure yourself. And we try to do that systematically with the company meetings and stuff. But yeah, this is just one thing I would say. And then obviously, like from 11 till 12, I mean, that's not that long, but then I do like, definitely don't work and, we watch a video or whatever. And also, I think like taking one day off a week is probably a good thing. Like if you have one day where you totally unwind, so that's also good. Because if you don't, you're going to end up finding that downtime anyway. Like I don't think you can necessarily keep working 100 hours a week consistently. Like you're just going to, instead of like taking your Sunday off and going for a nice hike, you're going to end up like watching YouTube for 3 hours on Sunday and then thinking, what the hell why did I do this?
That's it. The wasted ship, right? I
Exactly.
had this
So
opportunity.
so I
What
think
am
you
I
should
doing?
accept you can't really do more than like 70, 80
Yeah.
hours. And the time you have left, like actually segment it and do something like worthwhile. Go see somebody.
Yeah, yeah. Be intentional, right? Be
Yeah, yeah,
intentional about it. Yeah.
exactly.
Okay. Still, it's still 80 hours a week. So,
Yeah.
how do you balance this with your personal life?
Yeah, it's difficult. I mean, obviously the professional bleeds into the personal a bit. We're all very close on the team and everything. So, we have a lot of camaraderie that has, so there's some personal aspects to just the team in a way to some extent. Very, very good friends with everyone on the team. But yeah, outside of that, I think again, it's just a case of being quite strict. So like taking Sundays off, making sure you make plans to see your family and friends, and getting things in the calendar as well is one thing I do, because I do have a bit of, I think every founder probably has some, like, let's say, workaholism tendencies. So what you need to do, I think, is be quite deliberate, make plans to go for drinks next Friday, make plans to go out for the weekend, and then it's in the calendar, and stick to it. Which is when you've got deadlines and fires to put out, it can be tempting to just segment every hour for work. But you got to, like, again, it's like a marathon, not a sprint, right? Like it feels like you're constantly sprinting with fires to put out, but having done this for 2 years now, like if you burn yourself out for like 2 weeks, like it's not in the company's interest. So you got to, like, you got to sustain yourself. Yeah.
100%. And yeah, the most successful people, some of them tend to obsess over these things, and it is what it is, right? So
Yeah.
again, it's a matter of keeping the right structure, as you said, and the right balance, I would say.
For sure.
So Daniel, we are almost at our time, so I have a couple of rapid fire questions.
Sure.
So these are straight to the point, short questions, short answers.
Yeah.
So the first is, what was your biggest mistake to date?
Biggest mistake, I think, was not pivoting earlier and overhiring. Probably, yeah.
What was your best decision to date?
Maybe pivoting. Again, in the context of the company, I would say like having the conviction to change direction was probably the best decision so far. Yeah.
Can you share one key lesson you learned on product?
On product, it's quite vague again. Just you don't know what you don't know. Your customers know. I guess is the key lesson. Like listen to them, not your own intuition too much. Yeah.
Okay, one key lesson in marketing. I think it's going to be similar.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, like, I guess the more point is like a great product sells itself is one of the main things, to be honest.
Can you share one key lesson you learned on managing people?
I think what I would say is that give people autonomy and don't micromanage. I think more people go too far in micromanaging, and like let people fail, let them make mistakes, let them learn from them, and trust them to grow into the role.
Love it. Can you share one key lesson you learned about creating and maintaining a good culture?
I think openness is very important. So one thing is we have a weekly sync where everyone on the team shares their thoughts, what we could be doing better as a company. Be okay to receive criticism from your team as a founder. It's not personal. Everyone wants the company to succeed. So the more you can democratize and make people feel ownership, the better.
So, one resource that was invaluable to your success, and this can be a book, a podcast, a mentor, whatever.
I mean, it must be very common, but I do just think like the YC startup school videos have actually been like super on point, more so than I actually thought they would be. So they're very good.
So, last question. I'm going to put you on the spot.
Sure.
So, who should I interview next? Someone you really respect.
Oh God. Yeah, good question. I mean, there's a lot of amazing founders. I think Joe or Zhao at Crew AI has done an incredibly good job. If you manage to lock him down, they're doing amazing. Yeah, a Thai at Copilot Kit's doing really amazing work as well. I mean, I know people in the AI infrastructure space a lot, but maybe those are the two that come to mind immediately because I chatted with them recently. Yeah,
Perfect. At some point, we will speak about maybe an
of
intro
course,
or something along those lines if you
of
can.
course. Yeah, of course.
So that's it. Thank you, Daniel, for taking the time out of your schedule to sit down with me. This was really amazing. As a last note, where can people find you?
So if you go to unify.ai, that's where you can find us on the website. And then also on our Discord, if you go on like company at the top of the page, I'm on Discord pretty much all the time. So you can find me there. And you can also book a call through the website, etc. So lots of ways. Yeah.
Thank you, Daniel. So, to you listening, thank you for staying with us for the full episode, and I'll see you again in the next edition of the Startup Journey podcast.